Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.Res. 1016 as amended, a bill expressing the condolences of the House of Representatives on the death of William F. Buckley, Jr.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
House Resolution 1016, resolution expressing the condolences of the House of Representatives on the death of William F. Buckley, Jr.
The House of Representatives, April 23, 2008. You heard Congressman Danny Davis, Democrat of Illinois, ask the House to pass a resolution following the death of William F. Buckley, Jr. The conservative commentator authored over 50 books. He founded National Review magazine, he hosted Firing Line for over 30 years, and he died in February 2008. 2025 has been a year of remembering William F. Buckley. In March, the U.S. Postal Service announced a new stamp with his picture. In June, a new biography, Buckley, The Life and the Revolution That Changed America, by Sam Tenenhouse, was published. And in November, it would have been Bill Buckley's 100th birthday. If you're unfamiliar with William F. Buckley or need a refresher, or if you're simply a fan, then this episode of C-SPAN's Podcast The Weekly is just the thing for you. We hear about his life and legacy, and we do so through words and tributes and stories offered by members of Congress from both sides of the aisle.
Mr. Speaker, William F. Buckley once said that he would rather be governed by the first 500 names in the Boston telephone book than by the first 500 names on the Harvard faculty. And after reading the plan devised by the President's 511-member healthcare task force, I think I know exactly what he means. This task force, composed of academics and government employees and assorted policy wonks, a bunch of bureaucrats, has managed to propose exactly the wrong remedy for America's health care.
Representative Cass Ballinger, Republican of North Carolina, September 22, 1993, citing one of William F. Buckley's most famous lines. Another famous Bill Buckley line via Florida Republican Congressman Cliff Stearns, October 18, 2005.
Speaker, 50 years ago, a new periodical entered the marketplace in American history. That publication was the National Review. Its founder and editor was 29-year-old William F. Buckley. From the beginning, his magazine stood, quote, athwart history, yelling stop at a time when no one is inclined to do so, or to have much patience with those who urge to do it. And for 5 decades, it was bravely and effectively espoused conservative values and ideas with both humor and intelligence. It's no surprise that since its inception, we have seen widespread acceptance of conservative principles like economic freedom, individual responsibility, and traditional values. Buckley and National Review did much more than stand athwart history. They helped shape it, and the American world is better for it. I offer a most sincere happy birthday to Bill Buckley and thank you for his wonderful creation. And I congratulate the people and family at National Review for 50 years of fine work, with hopefully many more years to come.
That Buckley line, standing athwart history and yelling stop, was cited by a Democrat too, Iowa Senator Tom Harkin, and more than once. Here's July 20th, 2012.
We all remember William Buckley's famous admonition to conservatives. He said that the role of conservatives is, quote, to stand athwart history yelling stop. William F. Buckley. The role of conservatives is to stand athwart history yelling stop. Well, in 1935, President Roosevelt and the Congress passed Social Security, providing basic retirement security for every American. Republicans yelled stop. They fought it bitterly. 75 years later, they're still trying to undo Social Security. In 1965, President Johnson and the Congress passed Medicare, ensuring seniors access to decent health care coverage. Republicans yelled stop. They fought it bitterly. 45 years later, they're still trying to undo Medicare. Well, here they go again. Here they go again in trying to undo the Affordable Care Act. As I've said before, they are on the wrong side of history.
And here's Tom Harkin, March 13th, 2013.
In 1935, the Congress and President Roosevelt passed the Social Security Act. 75 years later, there are still some on the Republican side that would like to get rid of that. So I guess we'll continue to have a few voices, not everyone, but a few voices that will still be fighting the Affordable Care Act years from now. In 1965, Congress passed Medicare. Republicans fought it bitterly, by the way. 45 years later, a few on that side are still trying to undo Medicare with voucherizing it and all that kind of stuff. So I can just say, here we go again. I always remember what William F. Buckley, the founder of the National Review, sort of the godfather of the modern conservative movement in America, a very intellectual kind of guy. He was very intellectual and a good writer and a good speaker. I always enjoyed watching William F. Buckley. He once said, and this is a quote, he said, "The role of conservatives is to, quote, stand athwart history yelling stop." Well, is that really the role?
Meantime, guess who watched Bill Buckley's long-running television program, Firing Line? From January 23rd, 1995, here's another Democratic senator from West Virginia, Robert Byrd.
Currently, the hunt dogs are baying at the heels of PBS and the public broadcasting network across our country. We're informed that PBS is too liberal, too radical, too un-American, too elitist, too left-wing. Do these critics mean to say that William F. Buckley's Firing Line is an example of liberal programming? William Buckley has been appearing on Firing Line, a program produced admirably by South Carolina Public Broadcasting for years. Indeed, to follow, William Buckley is to be disarmed by one of the most rational, intellectually charming, and persuasive conservative personalities in American history, a man who has exploited Firing Line brilliantly in a committed effort to force millions of Americans to rethink, or to think for the first time even, the seminal principles of their own political, economic, and social positions. Or do the critics mean to include in their criticisms of the liberal and elitist descriptions of PBS the reruns of the Lawrence Welk Show, reproduced by Oklahoma Public Television to the absolute delight of millions upon millions of middle-aged and older Americans who await each week the replay of some of the most beautiful music ever composed and performed in America? Or do they mean Wall Street Week, presided over by one of the most urbane and persuasive capitalists ever to advocate the free enterprise system anywhere and at any time? Or do those critics include among left-wing elitists the conservative Ben Wattenberg?
And a year earlier, another mention of Firing Line from an unlikely source. June 28th, 1994, here's independent Congressman from Vermont, Bernie Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, I do not object that there are 3 regularly scheduled business shows on PBS: Wall Street Week, the Nightly Business Report, and Adam Smith's Money World. I have no problem with those programs. I do have a problem, however, that there is not one regularly scheduled program on the PBS which focuses on the needs and the problems of the working people of America. If there are 3 regularly scheduled business shows, why is there not at least one, just one, regularly scheduled show reflecting the interest of working people and organized labor? I do not object that 3 weekly public affairs shows on the PBS stations are hosted by individuals who have been associated with the National Review, a leading right-wing magazine. William Buckley's Firing Line, John McLaughlin's McLaughlin Group, and McLaughlin's One-on-One. I do not object to these shows, but I do object that there is not one weekly PBS show which is hosted by a journalist from a labor or a progressive point of view.
In June 2004, Bill Buckley gave up control of National Review. He relinquished his ownership shares to a board of trustees. The next month, Congressman Joe Wilson, Republican of South Carolina, noted his exit off the conservative stage.
Mr. Speaker, today the conservative movement in America stands on the shoulder of giants, men such as Edmund Burke, T.S. Eliot, F.A. Hayek, Whittaker Chambers, and William F. Buckley, Jr. Of all these theorists, no one has made a deeper and more profound impression on my life than William F. Buckley, Jr. Since attending high school, I have read National Review, the magazine founded by Mr. Buckley in 1955. Through his stewardship of conservatism's flagship magazine, he was able to direct our visions and coherently communicate our positive philosophy. Indeed, Mr. Buckley defined the conservative movement as one that promotes a strong national defense to defeat communism and terrorism, and for limited government, lower taxation, personal responsibility, individual freedom. These principles are still the basis of conservatism today, and National Review, after nearly 50 years, is still our guidebook. Last week, Mr. Buckley turned over his ownership of National Review and ended a special era in American history. I ask all of my colleagues to join me in thanking William F. Buckley, Jr. for his service to the American political dialogue.
On February 27, 2008, William F. Buckley died. At the beginning of this podcast, you heard the House resolution marking his passing. Now, here's the Senate resolution, 2 days after his death, followed by remarks by Democratic Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid.
Clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 466, honoring the life of William F. Buckley, Jr.
Without objection, Senate will proceed.
I ask consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be laid on the table. Any statements relating to this matter appear in the record as if given.
Without objection.
Madam President, I will just briefly say in regard to this, I think we're all going to miss Mr. Buckley. We've all watched him on TV, his use of words which were not developed in Searchlight, Nevada, but he had a great knowledge of the English language and was always such a gentleman, even though many of the things he said were not in keeping with some of the things I believed in. We'll all miss him, and I think many of the tributes written to him, for example, in today's newspaper, there was a wonderful piece written by George Will about William Buckley. So I'm happy that we have this resolution honoring his life.
Several members of Congress went to the House and Senate floor with stories about Bill Buckley, like Joe Lieberman. At the time, he was an independent senator from Connecticut, but he won election as a Democrat. In 1988, he defeated a liberal Republican, Lowell Weicker.
When I ran for the Senate in 1988, let's just say with the diplomacy that marks this chamber, that Bill Buckley was not a fan of the incumbent Republican senator. And he called me up and said, Joe, I wish I could impersonate him. Joe, I'm thinking of endorsing you. Do you think that would help you? So I said, well, now that's very good of you. Then he interrupted and says, please understand, this is the only time I am likely to endorse you in your career. So I said, it probably would. What do you have in mind? Well, he wrote a column, very good column, in the National Review, and I think in a syndicated column. He also, with the puckishness that was part of him, started something he called Buck Pack, which was he said a pack open to anyone in Connecticut whose name was Buckley and who was committed to the defeat of the incumbent senator. At that time, they printed bumper stickers and the like and helped out in the campaign. I said to him after I won that election, and I won it by very little, that I thought that in a close election, as the President of the Senate sitting here knows, there's so many reasons one is successful. But I said, you have reason, Bill, to take part of the credit for this. I won by less than 1% of the vote. And I said, I'd go so far as to say you played a rabbinical role for me in this campaign. Well, what do you mean by that? So I said, your endorsement of me and the columns you wrote said to Republicans in Connecticut who really didn't like the incumbent senator, it's kosher to vote for Lieberman. And he laughed, and I remember that well.
Bill Buckley had a special connection to the U.S. Senate. His brother was a senator, a member of the Conservative Party of New York. He served one term from 1971 until 1977. He was defeated by Democrat Daniel Patrick Moynihan. Here's Utah Republican Orrin Hatch, who was elected senator in 1976.
In particular, it was my privilege to serve with James Buckley in a variety of capacities. His brother is a true gentleman, a wonderful human being. He was a great senator here, although only for one term. But both Bill and Jim Buckley, are wonderful examples of a family that has contributed so much to America.
And Republican Senator from Tennessee, Lamar Alexander.
And his unfailing courtesy have set an example for debaters of important issues in this country for more than half a century. In 1984, a couple of years after I had been a guest on Firing Line, which was William Buckley's television show, I sat next to him at a dinner. It was a Howard Baker fundraising roast here in Washington, D.C., and William Buckley was the master of ceremonies. I wrote about that visit in a little book I put out after I was governor called Steps Along the Way. When do you write? I asked him. Anytime, he replied. Books are about the only thing I write in a methodical way. I do them in Switzerland after I ski between about 5:30 and 7 p.m. I told him that when our family had visited Chartwell, Winston Churchill's former secretary said that Churchill sometimes dictated 5,000 words a night. Buckley was surprised. I can do 1,100 or so in a couple of hours, he said. Sometimes more, maybe up to 2,800 words at a time, but 5,000 would be a very productive night. With the advent of computer technology, I can know exactly what I do each time I write. For example, my last book took 112 hours. When do you make corrections? I asked him. I do that in about 30 minutes the next morning before I go skiing. You mean that you finish off the last day's work so you can be ready to start when you return from skiing? That's right. Then I send the transcript to 5 friends. When the transcripts come back, I put the 5 edited versions side by side and decide what changes to make. What about your columns? I asked him. How long do they take to write? You mean after I get them in mind? He said. Yes. About 20 to 30 minutes. Westbrook Pegler once told me it took him 11 hours to do a column. Do you make changes? I asked him. No, said William Buckley. I've been doing it for 22 years. I know the rhythm, the internal consistency of the column. I have it down. I don't change it. That would be like asking a jazz pianist to change his improvisation. That was William Buckley in 1984.
Now back to the House. Here again is Congressman Danny Davis of Illinois, a Democrat.
In February of 2008, Bill Buckley was found dead at his home in Stamford, Connecticut. Let us remember him for his great oratory skills, his admirable journalism, and his overall commitment to social activism. Mr. Buckley is known for a number of views ranging from drug legalization to opposition of the Iraq War. And whether you agreed or disagreed with him, you must recognize him for being a spirited man, well thought in his opinions and loyal to his country.
And here's another congressman named Davis, Virginia Republican Tom Davis.
The role of conservatives, he said, was not to propose programs that expanded government's reach. It was to propose the rules for which those programs to ensure that they work with minimal government intrusion. As rapidly as ideas burbled to the surface of Buckley's mind, it should come as no surprise that some required rethinking, which he did with unflinching grace and determination. National Review opposed the civil rights legislation in the mid-'60s, but less than 5 years later, he was opposing the presidential candidacy of segregationist George Wallace and growing to admire the Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr.
Chris Shays, Republican congressman from Connecticut, where William F. Buckley lived for much of his life, quoted his son.
But I never once ever heard him be nasty about anyone, be critical. He was a conservative, but I think different than some conservatives today. I'd like to place in the record a eulogy for my father, St. Patrick's Cathedral, April 4th, 2008, and that's by his only son, Christopher Buckley. And I'll just read a slight part of it. This was delivered on the occasion of the memorial mass for his dad at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And he began by saying, well, we talked about this day, he and I, a few years ago. He said to me, quote, if I'm still famous, try to convince the Cardinal to do the service at St. Patrick's. If I'm not, just tuck me away in Stanford. And then Chris goes on to say, well, Pop, I guess you're famous. And then he said, further on, Pope Benedict will be saying Mass here 2 weeks. I was told that the music at this Mass from my father would, in effect, be the dress rehearsal for the popes. I think that would have pleased him, though doubtless he'd have preferred it to be the other way around. It was a magnificent service. It was a service to which there was great joy and admiration, and people from all political persuasions.
And here's Republican Congressman from Indiana, Mike Pence.
William F. Buckley, from his many years on television, the program Firing Line was the longest running political television program in the history of American television. He demonstrated that wit and sharpness and civility can all go together. And it is a lesson that I suspect many of us, on an ongoing basis, can continue to learn and apply in the institutions of our government.
Finally, the most recent citation of William F. Buckley in Congress was October 18, 2023. It was a week and a half after the Hamas terror attack on Israel. Here's Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Not to be outdone, Notre Dame didn't even assign perfunctory blame to the terrorists. Instead, they bemoaned, quote, the outbreak of war in the Holy Land and calling for an end to the cycle of violence. I'm reminded of a retort the late, great Bill Buckley deployed in a debate when his opponent tried to have both sides of the Cold War. He said, quote, that's like saying that the man who pushes a little old lady into the path of a bus is morally equivalent to the man who pushes her out of its path because they both push little old ladies around.
And now, a bonus clip. One more cite of Bill Buckley's famous line about standing athwart history and yelling stop. This time, not from a member of Congress, but from a president. October 6, 2005, from the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, here's President George W. Bush.
It's an honor to celebrate the 50th anniversary of National Review and soon to be the 80th birthday of our honoree. You probably think this is the Yale Scholars Association meeting. Actually, Bill Buckley did have an influence on me when I followed him at Yale. You might remember one of his famous quotes was that the job of conservatives was to stand athwart history yelling stop. That's the approach I took to most of my classes. I also do want to throw a little bouquet to him and let him know that all I've learned about the English language.
That's it for this episode of C-SPAN's The Weekly. In this podcast, we heard politicians talking about William F. Buckley. If you want to hear Bill Buckley himself talk, use the C-SPAN video library. 38 appearances on C-SPAN, plus his April 4th, 2008 memorial service with a eulogy by Dr. Henry Kissinger. For now, thanks for listening and happy searching.